If Dungeon Masters abandoned us, who's gonna help us?
I will help you. Be at ease, my young enemies. I shall not harm you.
Welcome back to Retro-Wed, the Tide Hager. Welcome to day 3 of the LJN Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Toyline Review. And today we're going to talk about pretty much everything else. Day 1 was all the figures. Day 2 was the play set. Day 3, we're going to talk about the miniatures. We're going to talk about the PVCs. We're going to talk about the monsters. We're going to talk about the Bendables. And this is all kind of coming out at the right time, because not only do we have this NECA Grimsword that's starting to arrive, we're also getting some of the Hasbro versions of the original cartoon showing up. We're going to talk about this and more coming up. First off, we're going to start out by looking at the monsters. I didn't have them in the first shot, but they should be in the thumbnail. So anyway, there are 3 monsters. We have Tiamat, the Hook Horror, and we have Dragoon. And so we're going to start out with looking at Hook Horror. Hook Horror is one of the first figures that I actually got my hands on in this toy line, and I really didn't understand all of the different subgroups of collecting. I just kind of thought it would all be one list. There's so many different small subgroups, and he's a small subgroup of a monster. So we're starting with the monsters. And what he really is a solid body with no articulation in the legs. You have head articulation side to side and arms that move up and down. Now, the interesting thing about him that makes him stand out from some of the other items that are in this collection is the fact that he was in the original show for the Dungeons & Dragons show. He's an advanced Dungeons and Dragon character figure, but he also showed in the show. And there's like a group of them, I think. I think it was a multiple of this type of character showing up in one episode, maybe 2 episodes or something along those lines. But I do remember seeing him and thinking that it's kind of cool. Yeah, Hook Horror. Next up we have Dragoon. I'm going to adjust the camera up. His wings are pretty tall, and he looks pretty cool. One of the things about him, he does have a head articulation, arm articulation, but body that's just solid, just like what we saw with that last one. This one here, he has a tail that moves back and forth. Now you got to be careful because his very fragile wings that, let's disconnect them, they break, and I've seen them completely shattered and all that kind of stuff. Imagine throwing this thing into a toy box and throwing some like Tonka trucks on top of it. Those wings just will not hold up. They have some spikes on the top. They have kind of a gold to them. They're not the same exact ones. In fact, there's no reused wings in this line, which I kind of wish there were. I wished like they used all the same wings, and then you could just track down some other ones and repaint Tiamat's wings. That's not going to happen. But anyway, pretty cool figure, pretty cool character. It's just kind of a monster that all of your good guys will fight. Last of these monsters is the mighty Tiamat. We're going to pull the camera back. Tiamat's actually a pretty good size, but is not in scale. It's been pointed out in the past, not to scale. I don't think I'd want Tiamat any bigger than she already is. Now, I was lucky enough to get this from someone selling his childhood one in almost perfect condition. There are a couple of paint blemishes here and there, but to imagine that some kid had this, played with it, and held on to it for 40 years, pretty amazing overall. Tiamat does have a few features we'll get into here in just a bit, but I do want to point out that one of the biggest problems with this figure are the wings, and I'm gonna press fate here and try to pull a wing out. Maybe the wings aren't perfect on the one I got, but they're good enough for me, and I'm happy with that. In the paint, there are 5 heads. They're all different colors, and then this head here has a gimmick to where try to get the right angle where it chomps. I'm so afraid I'm going to break this. I mean, if it survived all these years, then I get it and break it, I would feel terrible. There's one other gimmick with Tiamat. Well, the tail moves. That's not really that big of a gimmick. That's not that big of a deal. Maybe it helps. No, it doesn't even help with stability. She's kind of unstable. She'll just kind of flop down. The legs. Now, the legs have a fun little feature, which we'll get into. If you move the paws like this, and then you move... this is always scary. And then you have kind of Tiamat like this flying, then she can grab someone. She's going to grab Presto. She needs some help. Anyway, that's the gimmick. I think it's not really that great of a gimmick, and I'm absolutely terrified of doing anything with it because I see these with broken legs, broken wings, and all that kind of stuff. And again, I don't want to be the one to break it. I'm happy to be the second owner of this thing and to cherish it forever. Next up, we're going to move through the Bendables pretty quick. This is a way to flesh out your toys, your toy line, your environment for a kid to get sort of relatively cheap figures, and they're still pretty cheap today. I think all these run about 20 to 30 bucks, depending on the day you buy them and who you buy them from, and maybe you can get a lot of them for cheaper than that, but they do sort of fill up the environment, so they have some sort of purpose, and let's look at them. So I don't know all their names, so I'm going to go straight down the list. This is the Carrion Crawler, and he came out in 84, I believe. So anyway, here he is. He looks kind of wacky. He's got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 legs. He's got 2, 4, 6, 7 tentacles. You can maneuver. The tentacles don't really maneuver. Do these back pieces? They don't maneuver, but the legs do. So you can go as far out to there, around the back if you want to. Some of the Bendables that I see, like the Star Wars Bendables, that was all that we had during the pre-1995 return. Those sucked. But this actually is pretty cool. And if you think about a giant large insect and what can it do, it can do what this Bendable can do. Next on the list is a 3-headed Chimera. Now it has adjustable wings, adjustable heads. I noticed that the heads don't adjust quite as much as, say, the wings. They can go all the way down to there or all the way up to here and do some flippity flapping. And this is actually the hardest one to get out of the Bendables. Well, for me it was at the time. I actually have a second one now that just came in a lot. I view that one as free. But I think it's the coolest one of all of them because I feel like it has some mythological reference. Maybe I'm wrong. Similar to the Chimera, but different is the 5-headed Hydra. And so this is a cool one, and this is one that I had. I think it came in my first initial lot, but yeah, it's got some spots on it, some marker from a kid or something, which you'd expect from something like this. So there's a tongue sticking out here, which is kind of cool. Tongue sticking out here, getting the heads adjusted to do whatever the heads do. That's interesting kind of stuff. But it's just like a little monster that your figures could fight and go up against. Let's see what he looks like next to a Warden. I think Warden could take him. I really do. I mean, he could take a sword and this isn't the Battlematic one, but he could cut each head. He could do it. But I'm so looking forward to the NECA Warden. Won't that be awesome? Next up is the Deadly Grail, and he's got some painted eyes in there. He's got the whites and the red. He's got some accents on the top. Like he's got a giant brain. Like he's Krang before Krang was Krang. Maybe he inspired Krang. Who knows? On the bottom, he's got some tentacles hanging down, but he's got the giant tentacles, which took me a long time to get them like symmetrically rounded and looking good and standing equally. So now we're gonna mess all that up and look at all this fun stuff. But he's a Bendable figure. Really cool. He's probably one of the cooler ones. And he's got most bright colors. Now, the next one we're going to look at here this is the Raging Roper. It's kind of like a Scorponok. It's a scorpion looking thing, but he's not a scorpion. His face is on the bottom. I don't think you can get his head up enough. You'd have to like make his feet, make him sit like this. He can sit like that. Or I just see him like this. That's the way I look at him, but pretty cool. He's got a tail. His tail, of course, can move and do all kinds of stuff, and he can sit pretty much with his tail and his bottom legs and do all that. But yeah, another figure, another crazy-looking creature. Looks kind of like an insect. Last Bendables we have here is the Neo Otig, and the thing about him is he's like a one-eyed purple people eater, and he's not a purple people eater. He's yellow and orange, and he also hates sunlight, lives deep underground where it's dark, and he has the tentacles to grab. So really all he has is this head eyepiece. It almost looks like from the Star Wars movie where he kind of came up in the trash monster, or the one that popped up in Dagobah. And then you got the arms that move and bend and can grab around things. But just cool looking, interesting, however you want to set them up. There's no wrong way. Next I'm going to talk about the miniatures, and then we're going to get into PVCs. This is where my collection starts to break down. I'm missing Warduke and Mercion. I never really went after these so much. They kind of showed up in lots, and I pieced them together. And then one of my buddies said, oh, you know, this one's hard to get, and that one's hard to get. And when I saw them for like super duper cheap, I went ahead and grabbed them. But if I don't see them super cheap, I just don't really care to complete them. And I actually thought these were like game pieces. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's kind of cool to have them. I didn't put much money into them, so just to have figures that weren't very expensive, pretty nice. Next up, we're going to start looking at PVC figures. Now, I think there's two classes of PVC figures. There's the bigger ones like these that actually have smaller accessories to go with them. We're going to take a look at each one of them starting now. So we're going to start with looking at Fire Elemental. This is a magic and a crystal ball treasure, and it came as a 2-pack, I guess. He's just one giant hunk of plastic, and he looks cool, kind of like a background character that you'd have, and one that you wouldn't mind having a couple of. This is the treasure, kind of cool looking orb. This actually looks just like the piece that they molded on the new Eternia that's going to open and close the hands on that giant Eternia thing. Oh, it fell. It is top heavy. I mean, I feel sorry for, you know, all of those things that are top heavy and have trouble standing up, but this crystal ball looks cool. Let's move on to the next one. Next up, we have the Odious Ogre and the Magic Book. Now, this was not by design. I did not try to get 2 books. He only comes with 1. But I do have 2 ogres, and they each have their own book. And here's the weird part. They have different colors. This is more like this is a gold that's like a brown. Now, I don't know if it was, I don't know. I have no idea if there's true variant or not. If it is a variant, it's just cool to have both of them. The ogre himself is just a statue. All these are just statues. No articulation whatsoever, but there's some paint here and there all over. And this is another one that you'd have. I could see people having a multitude of these. I have 2, and that's okay with me. I don't need to go after like 15 of them or anything. But in my mind, if you're building out a display, having several just ogres in the background, I mean, doesn't it just kind of make sense? Isn't this really a smart idea for LJN to flesh out their toy line? Alright, so next up we have the Troglodyte with the Goblin. Now, I have 2 of his little goblins. He only comes with 1, and it's just a happy accident, showed up in lots, whatever. And I think it's kind of cool to have these little guys. These little guys do look cool. They have a little bow and arrow, and just have it on a shelf just kind of fleshes it out. There's another one that comes with some, and they look like this, so for whatever reason, they just keep showing up in lots and having extras. But we'll look at those later. From the back, looks like they have a shield on their back, like they are ready for some action. But the Troglodyte himself he has, of course, one piece of PVC. It looks like a lizard. He's got a sword and an axe. There's his tail. He stands really solid. I like that. I mean, unlike my tripod with my camera, he stands really solid. Troglodyte with his goblin's pretty cool. Next up, we're going to get into the next one, which is the Terrible Troll and his goblin. Now, he only comes with 1, but somehow I ended up with 2, and I didn't even go after them. I didn't even collect these at all. They just showed up in lots, and I was like, cool. And figured after the dust settles, I'll see what I still need. But it's nice to have a couple of these to make a display. This guy here, of course, he is just a goofy looking dude. And again, I wasn't even going after him. He just showed up, and I was like, okay, we'll see what this stuff's about. 1 molded piece, a lot of paint on him for the figure, and yeah, creepy. And still, it scales really well with LJN. I mean, it's just, you could believe that these guys, I mean, if he's considered the biggest guy, so imagine a Melf going up against him. That's a serious battle. So here's the Umber Hulk and Dungeon treasure, and so let's look at the treasure real quick. It's just, looks like a dead skeleton covered in gold coins, which each one of them bad boys is worth $2,000 now. I mean, imagine back then they might have been like $50, or who knows? I mean, did bucks even exist back in the day? So this guy looks kind of cool. He's different than the rest of them because he has this articulated jaw piece, which I should not move too much because almost all these are broken off and missing. Ooh, I pulled it out. Look, I pulled it out. I didn't know that was a thing. I should not tempt fate, but yeah, they're always missing. Always. Like, I'm shocked I have one that has them in it. So I have another one that doesn't. And yeah, it's kind of cool to have a couple of these. Kind of like ogres in the background. It's not a big deal. And the back, some brown paint. Pretty cool. Let's look at the next one. He doesn't stand as well as some of them. The next one is the last one for the bigger ones before we get smaller PVCs. This is the Minotaur of the Maze and the Crown Treasure. So let's look at the Crown Treasure real quick. This is just a pillow with a crown on it, and kind of what you'd expect to see. Kind of something that you probably saw in Robin Hood, the animated Robin Hood. Kind of cool stuff. It just sits there. It's one of those. It's an accessory you might expect to get with Super 7 these days. And here he is. He wields an axe above his head, which I don't know. Axes are supposed to be warped, but his axe is warped. He does have like kind of an interesting bracelets on. He even has his fingernails painted, his horns painted, his teeth, eyes. There's a lot of paint on this guy. I mean, I guess you can spring for the paint after there's absolutely zero articulation in a statue from the 80s. All right, getting into the rest of these, this is where my collection completely breaks down. I'm going to show you a lot of pictures at the end, but yeah, I don't have a lot of this because I didn't chase it and didn't care. But for the historical reference, these figures here are the Elves Dwarfs of the Mountain King. Now, there's 3 of them. Seeing that I have 2 of the 3, I don't know what the third one looks like, but they're about the same size as Elkhorn, and Elkhorn he's done a lot of work in that play set in the Fortress of Fangs. He deserves to be part of this team, this trio. But you can see they're about the same size. They can kind of fit in with Elkhorn. He's got some friends now. So if Lord of the Rings taught me anything, an elf can be tall, and a dwarf is smaller, but tough as nails. So I am not busting on dwarfs at all. If you're a dwarf, then you're cool with me. Anyway, looking at these guys here, this is the next one on the list. These are the Orcs of the Broken Bone. They break some bones, pretty cool. They have shield. This one is holding his shield. His shield is on his back. Cool looking little figures. They're not really little. They're kind of decent size. I mean, I keep pulling out the measuring stick here. They're not super tall. They're not super short. But, you know, it's a realm of different beings that can do all kinds of different stuff. Lots of paint apps. They look like little knights. They got little armor. These are the Sarkin Mercenaries. So they just kind of come out and they're looking to make some money. They've got some orange and gold on them. I mean, they flash the money they make with that gold, gold armor. Not very many people have gold armor, especially back then. These days, it's even less common. Gold armor. I mean, this is like $3 million worth of armor. So pretty cool. They do not have any articulation like any of these PVCs. They look pretty cool. I don't know if you'd want a whole shelf of them though. Next up we have Sinister, Specter, and Lich. And I don't really see that they have any sort of magical powers, but they look like they should, don't they? And when I got these in hand, the first thing I thought were they're pretty big. See, they're sold as a 2-pack, just kind of like all the other ones that are sold as 2-packs, but check this one out. Here is it Kellic? Yeah. So Kellic is shorter than them. And it seems like they'd all be wizards together and doing some wizardy stuff together. And that's kind of cool. 2 different colors of purple, a white gown. My grandfather, for whatever, said never trust a woman in a white dress. So I don't trust this one over here. She's up to something. I don't know if there's more to that story. This dude's got a stick. And I don't know, is that a cross? A holy cross or something? So, I mean, kind of cool, kind of interesting. Kind of weird and strange at the same time. So next up we got two packs that I've got one of each, and this one does not want to stand up. So this guy here, it's in my hand, he's Elves of the Woodland, and I'll try to flash a picture of what his companion looks like. And then this one over here, he's called the Stalwart Man of Arms. And then there's a couple of other sets of Stalwart Man of Arms, but anyway, hopefully I got pictures up. This is a mess. This is just a mess. Alright, so the big one of the PVCs I don't have is called the Shanley Mound. The Shanley Mound comes with this treasure, and it's treasure sack. Again, I didn't go after these things, so I wasn't really targeting them. It's just what is this thing that I have in my collection? And I looked it up, and it's the Shanley Mound treasure sack. So it's kind of cool. Next up, we're going to have the Bugabear and Goblin, and I actually think, I can't really tell. I think I have the Goblin that goes with the Bugabear and Goblin. Maybe that's the right Goblin, but I'm going to be flashing a picture too. Hopefully that helps out. Next up, we've got the Bullyogs of Bog. I don't have them at all, and actually, I thought I had Bullyogs because these are like little green frog-looking dudes, but these little green frog-looking dudes are not Bullyogs, so... that's like the most commonly requested figure to be made in the new Hasbro line, Bullyogs. People love those. Next is Heroic Men-at-Arms, and I don't have either of those, and they just look more, I guess, knights with armor and all that kind of stuff, and that looks kind of cool. Next is the Skeleton Soldier of the Sith, and those Skeleton Warriors. There was actually an episode with Skeleton Warriors. Those do look pretty cool. They should have made a figure out of that. They really should have. Maybe that's on the roster for either Hasbro or maybe NECA. Who knows? Lastly, there's the Steadfast Man-at-Arms other 2-pack. I don't have either of those. So, just figured I'd point all these out. Lastly, we have wind-ups. So you remember the Takara wind-up RTD2 and all those kinds of things. Well, this had wind-ups, and from my understanding, these were supposed to be first on the list, but according to the dates, they were later on. So anyhow, the wind-ups is a Cave Fisher, a Pernicon, not a Piranacon. I want to call it Pernicon, and then Terraskew. Now, I understand Terraskew, which is the last one, is probably just prototype. They never really released it. Who really knows? These are so ultra rare that I've really only seen one person that has one, and I've never seen any of these other ones in the wild or on eBay or anything. And I also kind of don't care. But it's kind of cool. If I came across them, I'd definitely pick them up. So I hope you enjoy the first 3 days of LJN, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Week, here at Hydra Hangar. I said it was going to end today, but it's going to go on tomorrow, as my buddy got this figure. Yep, I'm going to be reviewing this guy tomorrow, taking a look at Grimsword. So let me know what you think about all of these, the wind-ups, the Bendables, the PVC big figures, the small PVC figure 2-packs, the monsters, in the comments below. Like and subscribe. See you tomorrow.
Almost forgotten how much fun this sort of thing can be.
Your fun has ended, Dungeon Master.
That thing doesn't know it's trunk from a hole in the ground.
However, if you're referring to the 81 World Series in your world, it was the Dodgers over the Yankees, 4 games to 2.